Hey guys, this is Darren Elias, and we're going to talk about a hand in this video played by Tom Dwan in a $1 million buy-in Triton event. Super interesting hand here, and shows some of the elements that you often run into in live poker in these unique scenarios where we're going to look at a 300 big blind deep, three-way four-bet pot, and how we approach situations like this, what kind of factors go into our decision making, and how we navigate these unique situations that often come up in live poker.
You're up against a player who's likely very aggressive, and you've got a pretty strong hand, but obviously don't beat any combinations that include an ace in them. So,
well, you want to talk about aggressive, Daniel. How about Tom Dwan, the man who just bludgeoned the poker world for so long online when he had his coming out party?
Yeah, but now he's aged. He's slowed down a little bit.
He's opened up to queens as his starting range.
Yeah, now he plays hands like queens, right? He used to be the guy in there with 10-6 offsuit all the time.
Well, we may still see some 10-6 offsuit out of him, but he is open to 8,000 with these ladies. And for Vivek Rajkumar, another one of the pros seated at this feature table, it is a 3-bet to 35,000, ill-timed with the suited connector, and behind him, Elton Sang with the ace-king, 4 bets to 100K, 10% of the starting stacks.
Yeah, so obviously Rajkumar here is sort of putting pressure on a button raise. It's a hand 7-8 suited that plays pretty well post-flop.
So before we get into the hand, I'm sure you're wondering why I'm on this video, and brings us to our next announcement that I'm going to be releasing my first ever poker training course for upswingpoker.com, releasing in May. And I've collaborated with my longtime friend Nick Petrangelo to put together a comprehensive tournament poker course, really sharing what we've learned over the last 20 years playing high-stakes poker tournaments online and live, and really a course offering something for everybody, where I think we're going to have pieces of this course which can benefit a beginner player or a low-stakes player, all the way up to super high rollers. Things can be learned even by 100K, 300K regulars in this course, with talking about a wide variety of topics. And in today's solver era of poker, I think we have a lot of focus on charts and solver outputs, and this course is definitely going to be unique in that it is not as solver based as a lot of content out there now, and really focusing on the actual situations and playing against the real players you see in your games and how to win the most money against those different player types. So spending a lot of time talking about deviations and adapting to what's going on, but also learning baseline theory and ICM, and Nick really being an expert in some of these more technical topics. Very excited about what we're able to join forces and give to you guys. So without further ado, we'll get into this hand where we're playing 1,500 3K blinds, about 1 million chips deep, and Tom Dwan's going to open the button to 8K with pocket queens, and Vivek going to 3-bet here from the small blind. And this is a fairly standard play among professional players, as we like to put a lot of these suited connector type hands in our 3-bet range from the small blind, a spot in general where there's going to be a heavy 3-bet percentage. Playing small blind versus button, nice to play with the initiative, going to generate a lot of immediate folds from the player on the button who's opening wide. And you're going to use a lot of these suited connector type hands, at least with some frequency, and most of the time the predominant strategy with hands anywhere from 5-6 suited all the way up to king-queen suited. We're going to see a lot of 3-bets here. And Elton in the big blind actually wakes up with ace-king and 4 bets to 100K. So we've got the 8K open, a 3-bet to 35, and now a 4-bet to 100K. And Tom Dwan facing a bit of a decision on the button with pocket queens. And when thinking about this decision, it's quite complex in the fact that we're very deep. We're 300 big blinds deep. We have towards the top of our opening range, and we have to think about how we're going to construct a re-raise 5-betting range. And do we want pocket queens in this range? What kind of hands would we like in that range? Are we going to play only call? And it's interesting to consider context. And this is something that I talk about a lot in the course, is zooming out and looking at the tournament. What tournament are we in? What's the field composition? What is our perceived ROI? How often does a tournament like this come along? And really weighing those factors in how much risk we're willing to take and how much how much variance we're comfortable with pre-flop. Because in a very soft event or a tournament like the World Series main event, for example, in a spot like this, even if you dealt me pocket kings on the button in this spot, I would be very hesitant to put in a 5-bet and play for all the money pre-flop in a scenario where villain could have aces. Even getting it in versus ace king, there's going to be risk of getting knocked out within a pre-flop scenario. And we know we have such a big perceived edge on the rest of the field in other spots and later in the tournament. So I'm always weighing what tournament we're in. What's the field composition look like? How much are we winning in this tournament? How much risk are we willing to take? All these factors go into my decision making in a spot like this when I have queens on the button and I'm considered deviating from, say, my baseline play, which is probably calling. I think in a super tough, smaller field event with re-entries, perhaps maybe we consider putting in 5 bets and ramping up the variance. But in a freeze out $1 million event, I'm sure Tom probably perceives this as a high ROI event. I think calling is probably the best play, and Tom does call here. Vivek now with 7-8 suited probably has live cards, probably likes his spot in his hand's ability to make straights and flushes and win big pots. So I like Vivek's call here as well.
Possibly win it before the flop or get more money in. Wow, what a flop.
Oh my. Jack 9 deuce with 2 diamonds, giving Rajkumar the gut shot straight flush draw, saying with just 2 overs, backdoor nut diamonds, and Dwan with the overpair and 2 checks in front of him. 303,000 in the pot already.
So we get a really interesting flop here with Jack 9 2 2 diamonds, where Vivek flops a flush draw with a gut shot, Elton has the 2 overcards with a nut blocker, and Tom with an overpair. And have an immediate interesting decision for Elton as the 4-better pre-flop and the aggressor. Does he want to continue on this flop, although he missed, and weighing our opponent's ranges? And is this a spot where he has enough equity and he likes the ace of diamonds enough to put in a bet here on the flop, knowing that stacked part ratio is now much lower, and although we were 300 blinds deep, there's now 300K in the middle and we're playing 800K effective. And Elton does end up checking here, and I think I like the check. It's always important to consider your opponent's ranges and how they're affected by the pre-flop action, where in a 4-bet pot like this, opponents' ranges are not super wide, and we have to be a little concerned with these middling cards with hands like pocket jacks and pocket nines in both of our villains' ranges. So I think this is a prudent check. I think betting small also an option. And thinking about balance and when playing against good players, something we talk a lot about in the course, where we put players into different player types or baskets, and Dwan and Vivek both strong professional players, and someone we put in either a type 1 or type 2 category, where we need to balance our ranges against strong players like this. And I think if we are checking a hand like ace king on the flop a lot, we also have to check some hands like pocket aces and pocket kings as well. So that's the first tough decision here. And then as we get to Dwan on the button, he also has a decision on whether or not he wants to bet his pocket queens and get money in the pot with an overpair. And his decision is a little different in the fact that he has a very strong hand, but it could also be way behind when he does face further action on the flop. So that's something to consider if he does bet this flop playing 800K and faces a raise. How is he going to respond to that, and how does pocket queens fare against that range? And is he narrowing things too much where there aren't enough second best hands in there because of the action pre-flop that he can get a lot of value? Because we have to think about how many jacks are really in our opponent's range here, and maybe Vivek has some king jack suited, some ace jack suited, some queen jack suited with which Dwan blocks. Not sure how Elton plays hands like ace jack pre-flop. Does he 4-bet them and then check the flop? Probably not every time. So interesting decision for Dwan. And going back to context, does he want to play a big pot in this tournament right now, or is he comfortable checking back on the flop and playing in position with an under-repped overpair? And the more I think about it, the more I like this check and maintaining control of this hand, where if we do bet the flop, it becomes a little tricky to get away if we do face further action here.
Oh, and some kerosene added to the fire here, courtesy of the 4 of diamonds, which gives Rajkumar the flush. Sang the nut flush draw with the 2 overs, and Dwan with the queen high flush draw on the overpair.
Well, this is going to be big trouble for both Elton and Dwan. Elton can't fold here with the ace of diamonds. Dwan has an overpair with a diamond. What?
That didn't just happen.
That is shocking that he would fold there with 2 overcards and the ace of diamonds. He didn't take much time to do so. Now for Tom, he's going to be in a pickle here. Tough to fold with the overpair. It's his best hand a lot of the time, and he's also got a flush draw. Trying to get a read on his buddy.
I'm still trying to find out what Elton Sang was thinking, folding the ace of diamonds in this spot. Obviously correct.
Yeah, I think most players would have called there for sure.
And speaking of calls, that's what Tom Dwan is forced to do.
And we get the 4 of diamonds on the turn, completing the flush. Very interesting card as Vivek now bets out into 2 opponents, and a straightforward play here. And in general, something I talk about in the training course is when there's a lot of money in the pot and you have a good hand, let's keep it simple and bet here. I think a lot of players do find themselves getting too tricky in spots like this, and always good to get money in with a good hand. And Elton has an interesting spot where he ends up folding here on the turn, and I think a lot of players would proceed. I may proceed as well, but a lot to think about in what does Vivek's range look like when he bets out 210K into 300 on the turn into 2 players after calling a 4-bet. And it's important to think about professional players and how they construct their ranges, especially pre-flop. When you think about what Vivek did, and he 3-bet small blind versus button and then called a 4-bet, he's not going to have many offsuit hands, just because he knows the dangers of, he's not going to call 100K out of position with a hand like King Queen offsuit or Ace Jack offsuit in a scenario like this. He recognizes the dangers and the reverse implied odds of playing a hand like that. So his range pre-flop is going to contain a lot of suited hands and a lot of pairs, which combined with this turn information of betting into 2 players on a board which contains a flush, likely going to have a lot of flushes and a lot of sets here. So Elton kind of deduces that his ace and king are no good in this spot, and he doesn't want to hit an ace or a king, not willing to pay the 200K to hit that, so not counting aces and kings as outs. Now he just has 1 pull at a flush, something around 20%, and doesn't like his odds calling 200K with 300 in the middle, or 500 after this bet. So an interesting spot here for Elton, one that is surprising at first glance, but the more we think about Vivek's range, the more sense it makes. And after he folds to Tom on the button here, don't think he has too much of a decision where the only thing we can really do is call, holding queens with the queen of diamonds, especially after checking back the flop. Our range, we're very high up in considering when we do call pre-flop and then check back this flop. This is one of the better hands we will ever have. Also containing the diamond, blocking some flushes, where the queen of diamonds a pretty important card when considering Vivek's range, and him 3-betting hands like queen 10 of diamonds, king queen of diamonds, things like that. So has to call here on the turn.
Gonna raise an even bigger one. So another 420,000 into the middle. Now the ace of spades on the end.
So this is oddly a good card for Tom Dwan, because if he was up against a hand like ace king or ace queen with a diamond, you know, he can fold now because there's very few bluffs that Vivek could have.
350K the sizing, and you can see Dwan uncomfortable in this spot, understandably.
I mean, imagine that card is the 3 of clubs. You know, Dwan is going to have to call that bet without much thought, but looks like he's using a time bank or 2 here.
Yeah, you may have noticed that LED cube there on the table, a dynamic shot clock, which varies street to street.
Trying to find a hand that you can beat here is difficult, because you were 3-bet from the small blind. You have a couple queens that block some stuff.
The reduce the diamonds.
And on the river, the ace comes in, and Vivek bets here again with 700K in the middle. He bets something around half pot, 350K, and Dwan immediately not liking his situation. And Similar to Elton's thought process, we have to remember what Vivek's range looked like pre-flop. And that's something I talk a lot about in the course, always revisiting previous streets action and what we can learn from players' actions on earlier streets as we put together the story of what's going on in this hand. And like we said, with Vivek's range containing mostly suited hands and pairs, and the offsuit hands he may have, maybe he has a hand like ace-queen offsuit or ace-king offsuit, probably making up the majority of his offsuit combos. Those hands have now rivered top pair, so if he did have a hand like, say, Elton had with ace-king with the ace of diamonds betting the turn, he now beats queens anyway. So I think it's very difficult in Dwan's spot to come up with bluffs that make sense for Vivek. I think maybe the only one we could think of would be Queen 10, which he blocks, and it would have to be suited, so something like Queen 10 of clubs, but is that too ambitious of a play from Vivek betting into two players on the turn without a diamond with a hand like that? And Tom making a good fold here and getting away from the overpair on the flop. So super interesting hand there. Played at the highest stakes, $1 million buy-in, 4-bet pot. Hope you guys enjoyed that little strategy discussion. And all month we'll be releasing these videos here on Upswing, and check back weekly as we'll be looking at more hands played at high stakes, more strategy discussion, previewing the release of Nick and I's course in May. So thanks for stopping by, and hope to see you again.